Thank you very much for that. I have two councillors who wish to speak on this topic. First, Albena Atanassova, who's down here.
Student member on council. I do believe that this model provides flexibility, and I do welcome and support this motion. But I would like to know, maybe that's a question for David, how do you see the RIBA's role in ensuring the dialogue between academia and practice, specifically within a model that requires 1 year practical experience for which you will be getting academic qualifications?
Do you want to answer that straight away, David?
Well, the thing is, of course, as the Welsh Schools model provides, and in addition to other courses which we currently validate, which offer work-based learning, Sheffield Hallam's Part 2, the Cambridge Part 2, etc., we're used already to assessing academic standards within credits which have been earned in a work-based context. So we're confident that we'll be able to pick it up through the rigour of the validation service. Can you repeat the rest of your question? I'm terribly sorry. I had one of those odd moments.
I was just wondering, how do you see the RIBA ensuring the dialogue between academia and practice?
Yes, yeah, thank you. In the break, I was talking to Ben Derbyshire about this. We believe that there's a great deal of work that can be done to expand and enhance the provisions of RIBA chartered practice as a vehicle to actually enable a firmer compact between schools and practices. Whether we like it or not, academic life is schismatic. Equally, there are perceived schisms and polarities between schools and practices. The reality is that actually we're all in exactly the same boat, paddling in exactly the same direction, which is to the realization of great architecture. So we don't underestimate the difficulties, but this is, as a corollary of today's debate and discussions, we believe that we have to get into better dialogue between schools and practices so that there is a principle of a flexible contract that can reflect an economic cycle. Those of you with longer memories will remember that the RIBA posited the idea of teaching practices before recession hit, and actually there was quite a significant amount of interest. We believe that we need to revive, refresh and reevaluate these ideas such that everybody in both professional practice and academic life understands that they're out there to achieve the same goals.
Thank you very much. George Oldham has also expressed a desire to speak on this one. Then we'll take any other councillors who wish to comment, starting with John Assael.
Thank you. I said earlier that in this particular forum, I wouldn't want to posit that education is a conspiracy against the young, but we do, in fact, keep the young bounded for longer than they need, I feel. Jack's contribution, I thought, amongst very many good contributions today, because it really has been quite an inspirational morning. I thought Jack's contribution was the most inspirational. I loved his 3+3 format, which, of course, the dead hand of Europe would stop, but it would be a great contribution. Just to go back to my own experience, I've run a multidisciplinary practice of 225 people. I've also been teaching professional practice in universities, and I would echo Jack's point that there are students that you see and you'd say, I'll have him in my office, or I'll have her in my office straight away. You know, they can contribute straight away. They're being held back in many ways because they're having to put more rings on the same tree. They're not learning other skills. They're not learning contributive skills. It's design, design, design. It's the, as a former speaker said, it's the obsession of the studio. And I think it's important that we see ourselves as very rounded, that we are not simply designers. This is our core skill, but we cannot say design lives in a vacuum. So I hope that everybody is in favor of this particular alternative, and I would say not only more speed to its elbow, but let's have more alternatives of that nature.
Thank you very much. John Assael.
If we look at the three institutions who are currently operating the system, Cambridge, Bath and Cardiff, it's all working very well. But of course, if you look at the league tables and see where they sit, you will also see that they're about the top 3 schools of architecture. Of course they can get placements if you go to Bath, dead easy. Same with Cambridge. I'm not sure the same would apply to a northern university that's quite small. So we need to be very careful about rolling out a program like this that's going to require the support of the architectural practice. A graduate from Cardiff, we employ lots of people from Cardiff, outstanding university, would easily get an interview at our practice. Somebody from a northern university with a 2-2, quite a challenge. For them to come and work for us for a year, accumulating credits, unlikely. So we've got to be very careful that we're going to be passing motions up here that we can't deliver. I'm an examiner at the Bartlett and at London Met at Part 3. Some of you would be shocked at the stories that I see about appalling practices that abuse their students. Now that's a situation where we have Part 3 schools of architecture representatives can't even find the time to go to those practices. What's going to happen if we've got, say, half the Part 2s, that's 1,000, out in practice? Who's going to find the time to actually go and monitor all of this? We heard from David Cash. He and his gang have got together with about 5 or 6 other great firms of architects, and guess what? They're going to find places for 10 or 15. Well, fabulous. But we really need to address the issue. We're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of students that are going to require the support of practices. And I'm skeptical that any motion we're going to pass today, and I support the principle of this motion, is going to make any difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And there's someone at the back there. I'm sorry you had their hand up. Yeah, here comes. Was it you, sir? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Harry Charrington. I'm the head of the Department of Architecture at the University of Westminster. I just wanted to point something out here about this accusation about studio. A couple of things. One is that in 5 years out of 7 years, you take 50% studio. So it's roughly 35% of your studies. You take 2 years full-time working in practice in those 7 years. It's about 28%, plus the professional studies you do during the 5 years. So actually the balance is fairly close. This proposition, which as a flexible alternative I'm completely happy with, but actually changes it to being about 42% practice, and in terms of studio it goes down to about 28%. Now, I just wanted to follow on from that with one thing, that no one seems to mention the things that have come up today about 7 years, these alternatives. Things because that's what they do. And if they put professional practice studies in a different place, that's because they do it. It's not to say we shouldn't encourage and try and influence beneficial behavior, but I think there needs to be an alertness that this division that's already been put forward in terms of, oh, it's all about studio, is erroneous. But secondly, that unless we understand that things are student-led, we're probably going to get nowhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jane Duncan.
Thank you very much. I'm going to respond to this from a practice perspective. As some of you may know, I was VP Practice and Profession for 6 years. And I've been listening very carefully to what our academics have been saying to us, but I think I've got something I'd like to pose as well, which is that I think that, frankly, as practitioners, we're not doing our job in 2 different ways. Firstly, what we're talking about here is the future of our profession. I mean, we are going to die out unless we look after the young people that are coming through the universities, and that means we've got to take their education within our practices extremely seriously, and we need to nurture them. And we need to nurture them not just because they're in their year out, but actually we're looking at lifetime learning. That means all of our practitioners, all the people that work for us, need to be able to be trained to work properly all the way through their working lives. And the second part of this is about money, because I think that the cost of studying is going to be a severe deterrent to a number of extremely highly skilled people that, to be honest, we want to have in our profession. So we've got another responsibility as practitioners, and during my presidency I am going to try and do something even more than is already happening here, and that is I want to encourage practitioners to charge appropriately. Because unless every practitioner has a realistic ambition to be able to know that they can earn, what, £150,000 each, why are the students going to come in thinking, well, if I'm very lucky, I'm going to have a debt of £100,000 and I'm not going to be able to pay it off ever? I'm afraid it's not acceptable. We have to do better in both cases as a profession, and I hope that everybody will join me in that.
Thank you very much. Yes, there's a gentleman then. Can you pass that mic back? And then Tzena James.
Hi, I'm Jed Cowser, Architect Director from BDP. I lead the profession group there in Manchester. I think I just want to kind of reinforce the points that the ladies just said and some points that have been made earlier. Because I think it's an absolute fact that the value and the prestige of the title of an architect is under constant sort of pressure. And I think whatever we do here needs to be considered really carefully. So, we can only and should only propose a kind of change to the education system that's going to enhance our title and our value. And I think that's something that we really need to think about. But education, I think, has got, should have a big part to play in that. Obviously, all of our, many of our roles over the kind of recent years have been taken by others. And this process shouldn't be just about, people have made reference to creating sort of oven-ready students for practice. I think that the whole process needs to be thought about in the context of producing oven-ready architects, which is a kind of a much important sort of point to think about. Now, I think that's going to be achieved whether it's in the context of a kind of a more radical approach or whether it's in the context of the traditional approach. Is about practices getting more closely kind of sort of linked to universities and to schools of architecture. We do that already in BDP, and this kind of new approach, taking kind of John's point, is just an extension of that sort of link. So we've got awards that we sponsor, people that we interview for dissertations, and I just want to kind of suggest that I think there needs to be flexibility. There needs to be a number of different ways that people can run through the profession sort of progression, so that people from sort of less affluent backgrounds do have that option to take.
Thank you very much. If you can pass the mic along to Tzena James, and then if there are any other councillors who want to speak before we move to the vote, to here.
Thank you. I'm Tzena James, Arabic Council. Architecture is a very complex profession, we must not forget. Dealing with design, art, science, technology, sociology, economics, and so forth. Less than 5 years, I think it's quite dangerous. The academic the academic modules must include in the core subject of understanding the intricacies of the profession, which are many. And indeed, even 5 years, I feel, are not enough for structural study and understanding of basic core understanding of the profession. And being pressed by the fees, which I fully agree have to be dealt in a kind of a different way, maybe pressurize the government, or the fact that we are pressurized by high fees, which is bad enough, we must not dilute the proficiency of the profession. And I feel that the industry, the architectural industry, will suffer from the competent and well-qualified architects. Indeed, they will learn in practice, and it's a whole life learning. I'm still learning. Everybody, one of us, it's so complicated that we learn all our lives. But the minimum of the study, I feel, should not be below 5 years.
Thank you very much. If you can pass the mic forward there. Thank you.
Just one question I'd like to address to all the heads of schools in the room. What's happened to the part-time courses that were all out there at one time? Pardon? You're still running them. The next question I would throw into this is, what if the Open University turned round and said, we're going to offer architecture and we're going to offer this course, okay? We can't exclude a provider like the Open University from offering architecture. And it might be the solution for those students that can't afford to go on a full-time course. Now, I think that if the Open University offered architecture as a course to fit in with this, this would throw the whole lot absolutely wide open. And I'm just thinking that whatever model we put in place, we should possibly use that as a counter to say, could the Open University offer this as a particular course? If it ticks the boxes for the Open University to run it, then it's a robust model for us to adopt.
Thank you. Other councillors, he's made your point for you. Any other councillors? Yes.
He's already said what I want to say.
Thank you very much.
Student Member of Council. I'd just like to say that although I support a reduction in the amount of fee pay in years 2-4, there needs to be a serious discussion on the length of time it takes to qualify. Echoing Jane, that if pre-qualification students aren't appropriately compensated for their time in practice that before the title is acquired, then there is still going to be a problem with it being a 7-year framework. I actually talked to someone in the break who did his studies in India and is now doing a 1-year course for the Part 3, and so will effectively be Part 3 qualified in 6 years in the UK, whereas home students still would take 7 years. And in response to the part-time courses, I looked last night on UCAS as if I was a new student entering the industry, and only full-time courses are advertised, so there's definitely a problem with the advertisement of that facility.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to take a couple more. I see one right at the back of the room.
I'd just like to say I hope we don't lose sight of the fact that it is a very broad church, and I'm sure it was well intentioned, but the expression of oven-ready students, office-ready students, I'm sure wasn't meant like that. But I think this debate's been raging for 50 years that I know of about what we expect architecture schools to give us in practice. And I'd just like to say, you know, it's a team game, and there's the trinity of architectural practice. For the sake of argument, we'll call them Marco, John, and Richard. You know, everybody has diverse skills, and we shouldn't be aiming to give everybody the same set of scores. They'll diversify anyway. So I think this proposal of 4 years full-time and 3 years in practice, we've got people in our office doing the Oxford Books course. I think it's extremely difficult, very hard work. And we've got other people that we're putting through university. So I think there's a number of ways of doing it, and the diversity should be applauded.
Thank you. I'm going to take one more comment from the young man in blue here, and then move over to Stephen for the vote.
Thank you. I'm Jonathan Braddick. I just wanted to comment and say that David Cash's venture is excellent, I think, but there's a danger, I think, that we mustn't, sorry to sound like a broken record, forget small practice and sole practitioners. I think there's a use there. I know John Assael said that there was a risk, you know, how you can't put the burden on all big practices, and I quite agree. I'm one of Dr. Roberts' alumni visitors, and it works extremely well there. I'm a sole practitioner, it doesn't get any smaller, and I think there's a lot of other small practitioners. And I think, therefore, engaging with smaller practitioners, there's a very useful pool of people across the country who would love to get involved.
Thank you. Time to move to a councillor. Thank you.
Vinesh Pommel, just a quick question to David. Within the 4 years of full-time study proposed here, would it still be possible to award a first degree, so maybe 3 years, and then you have the choice of awarding a undergraduate degree, and then the final year becomes a 4-year, maybe a specialist?
Again, it would be absolutely the choice of the university that was hosting the courses and qualifications, but there'd be no disincentive to a first degree being awarded within this structure.
Over to Stephen, bearing in mind, just as a quick observation, that what's being proposed here are options. It's not an imposition of a new system. It's opening up possibilities. Sorry.
I was going to say that, just to remind council members, this is what is being, this recommendation is an additional, more flexible model for study. So, council members, you don't want to insert the word typically anywhere in this one, okay? Good. So we can know. So I'm going to move straight to the vote on this one then, please. Again, as before, press button A for yes, B for no, and C for abstain. If you can press the buttons now, please. Okay, thank you. So that okay, well, Dominic, we'll check that out over lunch. But anyway, with 29 votes for the recommendation, 1 against. Dominic, we'll check it at lunchtime, but quite clearly. Dominic, we'll get it out over lunch, but quite clearly the recommendation is carried. Okay, thank you.